Hello and welcome to Famous Gays and Lesbians, Alleged and Otherwise. I'm your host, Thomas Connolly. I happen to be a gay actor living in the gayest city of them all, West Hollywood, California. Now, on today's episode, we're revealing a trio of some rather charismatic yet shady televangelists who are all up on the pulpit condemning homosexuality as a sin, yet secretly living their lives as practicing gay men. Now, first up, we had the legendary and outspoken Ernest Angley, who recently died at the age of 99. Now, his death put an end to abuse and scandal and the worst kinds of Christian hypocrisy. Now, the last decades of his life were riddled with lawsuits. One of these lawsuits was for non-payment of staffers in his church. And another lawsuit was for coercing a 76-year-old woman with dementia to write him a check for $340,000. Luckily, he got sued by the family and lost. But it was the details of a sexual abuse lawsuit by former staffer Brock Miller that really shook his congregation. Now, Brock Miller was a 19-year-old boy who went to Pastor Ernest Angley for counseling for his upcoming marriage to a young 22-year-old lady. Now, these counseling sessions with Brock Miller went on for months, and they consisted of Brock getting naked and Ernest Angley giving him hand jobs. Now, at first, you have to cut Brock Miller a little slack. He was confused, but he trusted Pastor Angley until in one session it escalated and Ernest Angley wanted to show him how to make an appropriate, proper, passionate French kiss. That's when Brock Miller snapped. So that's when Brock Miller initiated a sexual abuse lawsuit, which he eventually won against Pastor Ernest Angley. I guess it's a red flag when you have to disrobe and get naked for all your therapy sessions. Now, Brock Miller's lawsuit opened up the floodgate for all sorts of other lawsuits from other parishioners. Another parishioner and staffer, Bill Miller, actually had an audio recording of Pastor Angley admitting to having sex with him. Was that before all these lawsuits, Pastor Ernest Angley actually had a Boeing 747 airplane. Who doesn't need one of those to get around? But these lawsuits drained him of so much of his financial empire that the 747 wound up in his backyard on cinder blocks. Now, you have to remember that meanwhile, Pastor Angley was consistently preaching about the immorality of homosexuality. And he even referred to anyone with HIV or AIDS as having the gay plague. Well, speaking of HIV and AIDS, Pastor Angley actually said that he had the power to remove HIV or AIDS through his ministry prayer sessions and a hefty donation. Well, a grieving mother wound up suing him for that as well. That 747 in the backyard just went up on another cinder block. Now, this is the real doozy. Pastor Ernest Angley actually convinced his congregation that he had to do a personal inspection of any man's genitalia before they received any kind of surgery. And the congregation went along with this. Oh, yes, he sold it as a divine blessing. And now this would really speed up all recuperative healing. His male parishioners bought this crock of doo-doo for decades. Now, if you have any interest at all in stand-up, you should Google Robin Williams, who lampooned Pastor Ernest Angley brilliantly, as only Robin Williams could do. Well, all righty. Coming in at number 2 is the infamous Jim Bakker. With the recent release of The Eyes of Tammy Faye, played brilliantly by Jessica Chastain and Andrew Garfield, Jim Bakker is back in the national consciousness. Now, when Jim Bakker headed the PTL, Praise the Lord Ministries, he regularly referred to homosexuality as a sin. Now, you might remember that Tammy Faye Bakker had a huge gay following because very early on, she was very compassionate and loving to anybody who was suffering with AIDS. Well, the powers that be, like Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson, were disgusted by this. And this is shown in the movie. And they totally wanted Jim Bakker to reel that unwieldy wife in. That's right. Falwell and Robertson wanted all Christian ministries to hate those gays the way that, according to them, God in the Bible wanted us to. However, even in the movie The Eyes of Tammy Faye, it shows some gay incidents with Jim Bakker. Now, recently, a book by John Wieger titled PTL, The Rise and Fall of Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker's Evangelical Empire. Now, the book details 6 different men that Jim Bakker had gay relations with. One of them was John Wesley Fletcher, a longtime pastor and guest for several decades on the PTL show. Now, unfortunately, John Wesley Fletcher wound up dying of AIDS himself in 1996. The book is also very explicit in detailing a sexual gay relationship with Jay Babcock, a creative director on the PTL. Now, the book also mentions that one of the staffers in the PTL was a man named Gary Smith, and he claims that Jim made homosexual advances to him in the nude. I hate that when your boss shows up in the nude. Jim Bakker has vehemently denied ever having a gay encounter. However, this is the same man who spent 5 years in prison for embezzlement and fraud. Oh, and recently, now Jim is now in his 80s. Jim was peddling a fake COVID-19 cure with his latest wife, Lori Bakker, and he was forced by the courts to pay $156,000 in restitution. Now, sadly, Jim Bakker recently suffered a stroke. However, his new wife, Lori Bakker, said that Jim has been speaking to the Lord, and he's going to deliver some very powerful words in the not too distant future. Maybe he has another COVID cure. Now, last on the list of depraved homophobes is the notorious Ted Haggard. Ted Haggard is a real piece of work. As the founder and pastor of the New Life Church in Colorado Springs, Colorado, Ted was one of the biggest proponents against the legalization of same-sex marriage. And he was also seen in the documentary Jesus Camp promoting gay conversion therapy. Now, it wasn't long before Ted Haggard's life erupted into a huge scandal, even though he initially denied ever using crystal meth and having a 3-year affair with Mike Jones, gay porno actor and prostitute. Now, at first, Ted Haggard was very adamant about denying all these charges, but eventually there was so much evidence that he was forced to admit it. Now, at one point, Ted Haggard actually said, okay, I bought the crystal meth, but I never used it. Well, in a final concluding interview, Ted Haggard said, well, I don't know. I guess I'm a bisexual. Oh, there's something his wife wanted to hear. That must be part of the family values plan. Well, that's about it for this episode. If you like what you see, could you please like and subscribe? That would really help our show. This is Thomas Connolly for Famous Gays and Lesbians, alleged and otherwise. Until next time, bye-bye.